Today we're going to be looking at some games which accomplish memorable moments of the kind only possible in their particular medium. Storytelling happening within or as a direct result of interactivity, elevated beyond things like static cutscenes as a result of a dialogue choice or something. Things that pull you as the player directly into the experience in some way, or that otherwise make an artistic statement via the unique traits of video games. Things that, in doing so, affect the head as well as the heart. There's going to be lots of spoilers for these games in this video, so beware. I would absolutely recommend playing through these games if you haven't before watching this video. They're all masterpieces and worth experiencing firsthand if possible. Here are some timestamps if you want to skip around, and I'll segment the video itself in a way to help facilitate that. There's probably going to be hundreds of examples of this kind of thing that I'm unaware of, so feel free to constructively share them and why they're cool in the comments if there's something that you think should be here. There's definitely more that I can think of, but they're either directly inspired by or less impactful than the ones I've chosen here. A special mention goes out to Nier Replicant, which contains a few of these moments, but in my opinion is not quite on the level as the examples I've picked for this video. The chosen games here are my personal favorite examples of this phenomenon. With that out of the way, let's get started. Metal Gear Solid 2: Sons of Liberty. Raiden takes control. Much has been said of Hideo Kojima's postmodern classic and its eerily prescient observations and predictions of life amongst information control, social media as echo chambers, artificial intelligence, and more. The game is absolutely loaded with meta moments of several varieties, from Raiden's VR training consisting of previously released games in the series, to Solid Snake's infinite ammo bandana, to the self-awareness of its own existence as a sequel. But today we're going to focus on the core analogy of Raiden and the player character. As mentioned a moment ago, the game directly comments on Raiden's usage of VR training while presenting footage of the commercially released video game, Metal Gear Solid VR missions.
A virtual grunt of the digital age, that's just great.
Raiden, although capable, is directly contrasted in his real-world inexperience to the calm and collected and experienced Solid Snake. The grand majority of people playing this game can probably relate far more to Raiden than Snake. Shortly after taking control of Raiden in the plant chapter that the bulk of the game takes place in, the player is asked to input their personal information. This happens so early in the game that the player is likely to have forgotten about it by the ending, especially considering the sheer amount of bewildering events that happen in between. By the end, Raiden's nature as a puppet, trained and manipulated by forces beyond his control or even his understanding, is revealed. The ultimate theme of the game is brought to light in this mind-blowing, surreal finale with the exploration of the control of one's own life, destiny, and future. Raiden has finished his mission, and we watch him reckon with his newfound freedom. In an awesome bit of symbolism, Raiden's dog tags are revealed to display the information that the player input earlier in the game, representing the control that the player had over him, and the intrinsic sharing of their identities as a result. He then throws them away and takes charge of his own destiny. The Metal Gear series is loaded with meta moments of all varieties, but this particular one has always been particularly striking to me. Earthbound: The Final Battle. Earthbound is another masterpiece that pulls a similar yet significantly more emotionally powerful trick. About halfway through the game, the character, Tony, breaks the fourth wall and asks what the player's name is, asking them to watch over his friend Jeff, of the Chosen Four. Much later on, the protagonists have ventured back in time in robotic bodies and are confronting Giygas, the alien embodiment of evil. Evolved beyond a mere physical presence, you cannot comprehend the true form of Giygas' attack. Earthbound's battles are conducted in a first-person perspective a la Dragon Quest, with clearly indicated enemies amongst continuously morphing psychedelic backgrounds, up until this point. The final battle with Giygas turns this framework on its head, and the sinister backdrops themselves now embody your ultimate enemy, which is both a disturbing effect on its own, but also suggests the trippy visuals in all of the previous battles may have been manifestations of the influence of Giygas. The battle reaches a point where conventional combat is completely hopeless. Your only way out is to utilize Paula's Pray command, which up until this point in the game has not been very useful, but as a last hope, you pray. And every time you do, you get a little scene of the various characters you've met, helped and befriended throughout the journey, sensing that the player is in trouble and praying for them. The 7 prayers do exponentially more and more damage to Giygas. The visuals and audio begin to grow more and more chaotic and twisted. On the 8th attempt, but if Paula prays one last time, her prayer reaches its final destination, you, the player. And with your prayer, Giygas is finally defeated. Violence alongside conventional tactics and the arbitrary strategies of playing a turn-based video game are turned on their head, with the power of love and faith in one another ultimately conquering fear and the unknowable. I think that's a beautiful thing, especially in an age of increasing cynicism and sarcasm. This entire scenario is executed and presented so exquisitely, and perfectly utilizes the Super Nintendo's hardware for pitch-perfect visuals and audio. Earthbound is an amazing game, but the climax elevates it into a work of art. Like other peaks in gaming, its unique blend of elements have often been imitated but never quite duplicated. Before we move on to the final set of the more emotionally evocative games, let's shift gears for a minute and talk about some elements in the Souls series. My passion for these games is no secret if you've spent any time on this channel, but I wanted to reflect on a few particular elements across the various games that fit the topic. One thing I've always liked about these games is that they generally provide as much in-universe justification for gameplay elements as possible. Things like your character respawning as a result of the Nexus trapping your soul in Demon Souls, or the various elements resurrecting you and the bonfires in the Dark Souls trilogy. Multiplayer and messages happen within this immersive, unified game world, instead of it being siloed off in something like a title screen menu. This integrated design philosophy is most apparent within the first title, Demon Souls, where souls as a concept were far more integrated into the lore and mechanics of the game than the others. For example, in Demon Souls, the colorless deep fog envelopes the land of Boletaria, unleashing demons and isolating pockets of the setting. In the Dark Souls games, these fog gates continue to exist without much of a justification, as the nature of the soul within the trilogy is increasingly somewhat loosely defined as the games go on. In Bloodborne, Sekiro, and Elden Ring, they exist basically in a vestigial state, functioning simply as a mechanical indication that a boss fight lies on the other side, with little to no in-universe justification. But let's get back to the examples of the good, not the bad. One of my favorite unique elements of the online elements of Dark Souls 1 is the ringing of the bell in the Undead Parish. The difficulty of the route that most players will take in DS1 begins to ramp up in this area of the game, and the Gargoyles boss fight at the top of the church reflects that. When you defeat the Gargoyles and ring the Bell of Awakening, it rings not only out in the cutscene in your world, but also in the worlds of other players who are currently playing that game in that same area. The audio design of all of this is wonderful. The natural environment around the parish is also unusually pleasant for a Souls game, featuring gentle wind and birds chirping. Hearing the beautifully resonant sound of the bell above, the sound of another overcoming the challenge, is a wonderful form of collective encouragement in a game that's ultimately about perseverance. In the original release of the game, the second bell in Blighttown was intended to have the same effect, but seems to be glitched out and non-functioning. In the remastered versions of the game, the bell is now heard as intended down there as well. The bell in the parish functions as a notable checkpoint later on as well, as you scale Sen's Fortress and emerge outside on its towering walkways. Below, you can see the parish bell tower, a formerly elevated landmark, now far beneath your feet, a striking visual of the progress you've made on your journey. The Last Guardian, Flying Away. Fumito Ueda & Co.'s third title, The Last Guardian, is without a doubt the most emotionally powerful game I've ever played. Like in their previous games, Ico and Shadow of the Colossus, Ueda and his team demonstrate levels of grace, artistry, and emotional intelligence that are peerless within the industry. Throughout The Last Guardian, you as the boy and Trico, the giant dog, eagle, cat thing, Bond as you overcome breathtaking moments and set pieces as you attempt to escape your shared prison of the tower. The cutting-edge behavioral programming and animation make Trico feel like a real-life animal that slowly learns to not only trust you, but eventually becomes one that would give its life to protect you. The Last Guardian was in development for a long time, but as soon as it was officially revealed, speculation began that there was no way that this thing was going to survive the ending, especially given the emotionally bittersweet endings of Team Ico's previous titles. Like Ico and Shadow of the Colossus, the R1 button on the controller was a center point of the game's design and controls. In Ico, it's what you use to call to Yorda, to hold her hand, and to otherwise reach out to her. The choice of R1 was no coincidence, given that it's the closest approximation to the closing of your real-life hand and finger movement that would be accomplishable with a traditional controller. Likewise, with Shadow of the Colossus, this same design and control choice is, among other things, used to grab onto the fur of the colossi that you must scale and kill. This same philosophy now utilized in a violent context. In the ending of Shadow, Wander is transformed into a manifestation of Dorman and the energy of the colossi, and the script is flipped on the player. Now you are the lumbering colossus, getting slowly cut down in a fight that you cannot win. It's a powerful moment, but Team Ico's next game explores that dynamic in even greater, and in my opinion, more moving fashion. In The Last Guardian, the R1 button is now also used to command Trico, to tell him to go that way, to attack your enemies, to come to you, etc. After much trial and tribulation, to put it mildly, a battered and bruised Trico finally learns to fly and escapes the tower with the boy, who is near death from his injuries. He returns the boy to a small human village. The villagers, having only had adversarial encounters with the others of Trico's species, are immediately hostile to it. They surround Trico and prepare to fight it. The boy, in his weakened condition, has only one option left available to him, and the player must actively press the final input of the game, using that same R1 command that they've been utilizing all along, to tell Trico to save itself and to leave him. It's an extremely powerful moment, a capstone of an unforgettable and insanely underrated experience, and in my opinion the pinnacle of the thesis of this video, something only possible in gaming.